Kofi Bonner, head of urban Lennar, and I think really one of the visionaries in urban regeneration in the United States. He's worked at the city of San Francisco, he's worked in Oakland, he was worked in Cleveland. I mean, this is a person who's seen the possibilities of city building from public, private, and other realms, and he's going to lead sort of panel discussion in response to my presentation. Thank you very much.
You're first. They don't make it easy with the skirts.
Mr. Brown?
Good morning, nice to see you.
You said you'd be here.
I did say it.
Hey, Cole.
Hello, sir.
How are you?
Well, thank you.
Good.
No coincidence you put the mayor between us.
No coincidence at all. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Bruce, for that very kind introduction and certainly the great presentation. And John, that was a very, very interesting presentation. I think California is truly blessed, Nancy, but we know that. I am certainly honored to be a moderator here at this session. And I think I was chosen not because I'm essentially a real estate developer and developing the Hunters Point shipyard, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but primarily because of my work in economic development in my prior life. As Bruce mentioned, I was the economic development director, redevelopment director of the city of Emeryville. I was the economic development director of the city of Oakland, and certainly I was the deputy executive director for the San Francisco Redevelopment Agency. And I think it's important just to try to draw the distinction between what is truly, I think, a different economic model that Bruce is, and certainly other people are espousing. The innovation districts are very different from the way we used to think about developing things. And I'll spend just a brief moment just talking a little bit about how certainly the economic development officials from my vintage sort of looked at the particular situations that they were trying to solve for. Certainly in Emeryville. I mean, many of you know Emeryville is a little city across the bay, and I started in Emeryville in 1989 or so. And at that time, I would truly say that our strategy was just to create some economic survival. Emeryville is a small town, very limited population, probably only 1,400 homes at that time. Very limited tax base and shrinking. I believe one of the strongest portion of its budget came from the card clubs that were in Emeryville. And unfortunately for Emeryville, it was the product of the post-industrial economy. Much of the land in Emeryville was made up of fairly old and vacant warehouses. So as I say, I truly believe it was one of self-preservation in terms in that city. So we decided that one of the first things we could do is be a little easier to do business in than anywhere else. Now, in 1989, it wasn't too difficult to be a little easier to do business than Berkeley. It wasn't too difficult to be easier to do business in Oakland, and it certainly wasn't difficult to be easier to do business in San Francisco. So we streamlined the bureaucracy, and we essentially made it clear what the roadmap for development would be in Emeryville. And then we said, hey, all comers, if you bring what you're bringing, we will help you process it and get it through. It worked. The enhanced tax revenues we used to build roads, improve the infrastructure, create some more amenities, build some housing, create some affordable housing. But essentially, the city has been transformed. And that's certainly the way we approach things at that time. Now, the good news is that as part of our entitlement processes, we were able to attract companies like Pixar, and certainly everybody loves IKEA and Trader Joe's and all those kind of things, but that's sort of what happened. It wasn't as purposeful as the way we're thinking through the innovation districts these days. Then in Oakland, I will say I had a brief stint in Oakland. I certainly didn't spend too long there, but I spent a little bit of time, I thought we could try to recreate the model, try to streamline the bureaucracy, make it easier for folks to do business in Oakland. But I will admit to my failure to not essentially streamline the bureaucracy enough to convince the capital markets and other sort of investment people that to invest at the scale that was necessary, or is necessary, frankly, to thwart the physical and economic disinvestment that had happened over several years. Then I came to San Francisco, and San Francisco, I think, certainly way before my time here, and certainly way after I left, was practicing what I would consider some of the purest forms of redevelopment. If you think about it, San Francisco had a dedicated agency, and in that agency, they streamlined decision-making, they came up with a vision, and they moved forward, and it was a lot easier for folks to understand where the city wanted to go in certain distressed areas, and investment capital came in. People built what they were building, and I think there are some actual significant successes were made. Certainly, Yerba Buena Gardens area, the Embarcadero area, south of Market, Mission Bay. All those are, I think, prime examples. But again, the notion was really much more to sort of make it easier to do business in those particular places, and then let's see what kind of investment will come in, except for perhaps for Mission Bay, which I'm sure the mayor will talk about. So in the older models, as I see it anyway, we would generally, as economic development officials, say, you know what, wouldn't it be great if we could get a standalone retail center, the bigger the better. Let's go get a few auto sales kind of businesses, and Lord knows the sales tax would be great for our budget. Let's build a big mixed-use development, and that would be great too. Or maybe even get some casinos. I mean, some cities, that's perhaps their capital plan. And some people, actually, some cities really love the notion of economic development centered around sports stadia. That's not what innovation districts, and certainly the concept of innovation districts, about. And I think, and certainly Bruce, I think, articulated it well. And so we're here, I think we have this distinguished panel. I certainly don't want to go through everybody's distinguished achievements, because it's before you all. But I did want to sort of share my thoughts with respect to the key differences as an old economic development official. The Brookings work, I think, points to sort of 5 key sort of strategies that folks have to think through as they create and think through the innovation district. First, you build the collaborative leadership. It's a no-brainer, you probably need that anyway. Establishing a vision for growth, pursuing talent and technology. You have to enhance the access to capital. And perhaps the last thing that Bruce was talking about was promoting the inclusive growth. And I think those 5 keys are critical to, frankly, most economic development pieces, but when you think of the integration of those components in an innovation district, they're critical. So what I'd like to do is ask the 4 distinguished panelists from their specific point of view, from the organization they represent, or have represented in the past, to think through sort of how they may have played a role, are playing a role, or will play a role in the sort of the creation of this innovation district. So I was struck by John's graphs, and the state is obviously key to many, many things, because as Bruce has said often, and it took him a little while to get to that punchline today, but usually he says it up front, but the federal government has left the building. And Bruce said that, but we do need and rely very significantly on the state. And we have here Nancy McFadden, and Nancy.
Turn my back to the audience, sorry.
Nancy plays a critical role within the state administration, and certainly working for the governor. And I think Nancy has been a great friend of the San Francisco shipyard, if I may say so, Nancy, and I thank you for that. But it's so interesting to see the economic figures as they flashed on the screen and see how California is so way up there and everybody's great today. But I think you remember a less happy time. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, if you could share what you all did to get us to this point, and perhaps share some key initiatives you have for moving forward.
Great. Well, thank you, Kofi. I'd be happy to tell the story of the last few years in California. Before I do, I just want to say I'm honored to be on this panel with all these distinguished people. And I also wanted to say something about Bruce Katz, because I thought when Bruce made his presentation, he said something about what we're doing at Brookings is kind of cataloging and really reporting on what a phenomenon that exists. And the truth is, I've known Bruce for a very long time. We were both, when he was chief of staff to Secretary Cuomo at HUD, I was chief of staff to the Attorney General, and we worked together on all kinds of things. And the truth is that Bruce has been seeding the kinds of ideas and theories and results that he talked about for a couple of decades. And his thinking is actually embedded in this whole notion of an innovation economy and how do metropolitan areas build on that. I think he was being a little humble, and I just wanted to say that that his innovative thinking has been key to seeing those kinds of things happening across the country. So with that, I'll go back to California. It is true that things are looking up in our state, but when Governor Brown took office and we brought in the administration almost 4 years ago, a lot of people were talking about California as a failed state. I remember distinctly there were lots of references to California as the United States Greece, that's the direction that we were going in. We had a $26 billion budget deficit. We had what we call a momentous wall of debt. And every indicator, unlike what John's charts were showing, were suggesting that they were going in the wrong direction. And when we thought about what needed to happen for the state, the governor was really laser focused on getting the state and state government and state finances back on track. And we really believe that doing that, first of all, was the fundamental mission of the governor and the governor's administration, but it would also be a fundamental key to helping economic recovery in California. Because if the state is beleaguered, if the state has credit ratings that are in the toilet, if the state can't manage its own finances, how does anybody have confidence that investment in the state makes sense? And so we went about trying to corral that $26 billion budget deficit. There's no budget deficit today. It was done through a lot of hard work, very tough cuts that weren't gimmicky or temporary, cuts that have lasted and are permanent. We eliminated programs. In fact, we eliminated some economic development programs because they were costing the state money and we didn't think that they were producing, on the whole, what they should be, including redevelopment, a very controversial decision. There, by the way, were bright spots and uses of redevelopment that were not suspect and that did have value. But across the entire state, there were too many examples of money that was just not really producing economic development, and we eliminated it. We changed the way our criminal justice system works between state prisons and local jails. And yes, we added to the tax volatility that John talked about with a temporary tax measure that we had to go to the people to get approved. And people like taxing the upper levels of upper level income folks, and they're willing to do that, and they're not willing to tax across the board. And so we put a tax measure on the ballot that was not the tax measure, by the way, that we wanted to try to get through the legislature, but we couldn't get any Republican votes for that. We put a tax measure on the ballot that we knew would pass, and it did. And it's devoted to schools, and it's starting to really help bring our schools back to the kind of funding that we need. So a lot of hard work, a lot of difficult decisions, and a lot of stick-to-itness. We are an administration that says no a lot, that doesn't do a million things, that really focuses on priorities. We focused on education. We focused on getting the state's fiscal house in order. We focused on our criminal justice system, and now we're focusing on things like pension reform and trying to deal with a broken water system across the state. And there's a bond measure on the ballot. I won't say what you should do on it, but I'll just note that there's a bond measure on the ballot. And there's also a bond measure on the ballot that provides for a real rainy day fund for California, something that we really haven't had. So we're trying to put institutional building blocks in place that will last beyond one administration, although we have some hope that this administration will be continuing on for another 4 years. But we're really trying to change California and how it's governed and how it approaches its financing. Tax volatility, as John said, is a real issue for California. It's a formidable issue, and it's one that perhaps we'll see some work done in the next 4 years. But it's one that's really difficult to tackle in California. But I agree with John, it's something that we should. I can talk about innovation districts specific later on, but I want to stop there to let other people talk.
Well, if I might just follow up, because one of the tangible, I think, benefits of the stabilization of the economy is that capital is coming back. I mean, certainly in my industry, we rely significantly on public finance, and obviously capital period, but public finance especially. And as we go out into the bond market now, I mean, their takers are enormous, as it certainly wasn't the case a few years ago, so absolutely, I thank you for that. And certainly it's those kinds of things would enable us to do what we do in our particular business. Mayor Brown, I think the last assignment you gave me before I took off was to go before the Board of Supervisors and argue the merits of the Mission Bay Disposition and Development Agreement so that indeed it could be approved. And it was approved. I'm sure it wasn't because of my persuasiveness. I'm sure there was some talking behind the scenes before I got there, knowing you. But I will say that as being a part of that initial process, I know that you had some key decisions to make, both with the developer and with UCSF, and I thought it would be an interesting time, given the success of Mission Bay, to talk a little bit about how you built that collaborative sort of partnership with both Mission Bay, with UCSF and Nelson Rising of Catellus. And I think that would be useful to hear from the public-private partner, how public-private partnerships were truly created.
All right, so that no one is misled, I spent about 30 years or more trying to abolish local government before becoming part of local government. I really didn't believe that they were necessary, that they were inefficient, and that they had a tremendous amount of people who allowed political decisions to be substituted for good public policy decisions, that there were very few people at the local level who were willing to take the risk to do what was totally right if it was inconsistent with their tenure. So when I became the mayor of San Francisco, it was clear that there had to be some really significant and quick changes, like removing all the bureaucrats that I had the power to remove and removing all the staff that I had the power to remove. When I did that, it became very clear that there were no replacements, that there was no Nancy McFadden, there was no person around, very easily accessible. And so all the conversations that Bruce and others talked about about vision and visionary and what have you. I didn't have any of that. It was all pure, unadulterated, practical approach to trying to make a system as good as had been the functioning aspect of what we had done at state government, even with Republican governors and Democratic governors and the legislative bodies, et cetera. We're light years ahead of what was happening at the local level. But now I'm there at the local level, and I got to try to figure out how to make the transition. The first thing, of course, was to get good staff people like Kofi and others who were willing really to do what needed to be done if they had the executive branch support, so to speak, of implementing their skills and implementing their programs. And in San Francisco, that's a real challenge because there are 700 and almost 800,000 people now, and on every decision, there are at least 1,000,005 different opinions, and on each one of those, and they implement that when they can, and they do it ferociously. Well, with that in mind, when the question of what happens to an old rail yard south of Market, surrounded by a collection of places just slightly above that which Kofi described from Emeryville, all the rundown old warehouses, and as Herb Cain often says, in some aspects it was wine country, but not like Napa. With that particular presented opportunity, fortunately for me, in my private life, while still a legislator, I had also had a law office. And in that law office, we've been representing a number of people, including the people who were the successor owners of the land in the old rail yard, and with absolutely no real prospect of doing anything with that rail yard. The tools were just not there, no prospective capital investment, and what have you. But the University of California had been trolling about to find some place for an expanded campus. They'd been locked into a small space in the upper Haight, near Parnassus, where they could not grow one more. They'd gone up, they'd gone sideways, they'd done a lot of things, but they could not go where they needed to go, and therefore they could not even attract the kind of private sector research investment that they would want to do, nor could they attract the kind of personnel that they wanted to attract, i.e., the Nobel Prize winners in all their respective categories. And in my private life, I had been a part of an effort to try to get them over to the East Bay, trying to get them over to Harbor Bay Island for my friend Ron Cowan. And then, of course, we were in competition with Tontex, the people who had the space in Brisbane, a city that wants not one new voter, but would take everything else you can bring to them. And so it was an interesting process. And the University of California had lined up with Stanford, and they were going to become partners, and they invested in something called Executive Park, just south of the border, or right on the border near where Kofi's operation currently is. Well, there was a guy named Mike Bishop who ran the University of California. He had an innovative, creative guy who had graduated from the development systems in Las Vegas named Bruce Spalding. And with some regularity, as is now the case, I think, with Les and some of the other people who run the educational institutions, the process began where people run those institutions meet with the mayor. So Bruce Spalding and Mike Bishop met with me, and they were telling me all these things they were talking about they intended to do and where they intended to do them. I said, well, if you really want to do them, why don't you just do them here south of Market? Why don't you do them right there in Mission Bay in that space? And they said, well, we don't own it. I said, how many acres do you need? They said, 43. Not a problem. I will give away 43 acres, I think. Whether I had the authority or not didn't matter. It was a representation that had to be made to get them focused. And almost instantly, it became interesting because it also meant I had to find a way to get some private sector people to make it possible for those 43 acres to pick up whatever else needed to be picked up for the infrastructure development, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And sure enough, a guy named Gerson Baker, who had apparently at one time wanted to build a house for everybody in the world in Northern California, and Gerson Baker put together a team, stealing from Kofi's operation over in Emeryville, a couple of the people in the biotech world, or he put together a good team. And we had a good redevelopment agency. I had appointed most of them, so they were good. In every sense of the word. And by the way, I'd appointed 6 members of the Board of Supervisors, so Kofi was safe going before that body. He already had the votes. And so, with all of that in mind, we started to romance the University of California, Mike Bishop and Bruce Spalding, and I had Gerson doing the number, and of course, we established this in redevelopment, and we had an executive director of the redevelopment agency at that time that understood, and all I wanted out of it was for the University of California to be located there, and for 6,900, maybe 7,000 units, with at least a third of them being affordable, so the people who worked there, who did whatever they were doing there, would not have to travel very much in order to get back and forth to work and to do what they wanted to do. And then, of course, there was a guy named Don Fisher that was looking desperately for space for something called the Gap. Now, you understand, I didn't know anything about any of this stuff, haven't been in Sacramento, but Don Fisher seems like a good guy. Other than, dress down Fridays, we had no disagreement about anything. And lo and behold, he became one of the first private sector guys, other than the university, that would go in there in the envisioned 5 million square feet of other space beyond the 43 acres of the University of California. Now, you notice I have not used the word innovation, because we had no idea. Innovation, are you kidding me? We're not talking about innovation. We're talking about really hard line development and what have you. And as things began to unfold, and the research arm of the world began to look at that possibility, and the professors who were in the hallways on Parnassus became enthusiastic about recommending to the outside world for investment purposes, internationally and otherwise, come to Mission Bay. And when we had the kind of redevelopment agency and the kind of executive leadership there that would help us engage in making sure politically it made sense. And it made sense to this diverse, crazy voting population called San Francisco because it had all of the components of the kind of things that Bruce talked about and the kind of things that people are now talking about that are innovative concepts, all-inclusive, transportation, living quarters, Starbucks, Subway, the whole bit. Everything you can think of that makes a whole new community. Mission Bay became exactly that. And I got to tell you that it was with the cooperation of all the people of the city, the cooperation of the private investment sector. They stepped up even before it became clear that whatever you build in San Francisco, you're going to be rewarded 3 or 4 times the value or the cost of whatever you build. And Mission Bay set that tone and set that standard. And then suddenly, everybody wanted to be in Mission Bay and surround the Mission Bay. And we went to the state of California, who was at that time thinking seriously of several physical sites for extensive research purposes in the medical world. And Gray Davis, then the governor, gave us preferential treatment, by the way. And that's what you get when you have really good political contact. You can get preferential treatment. And so we got preferential treatment for the location of one of those operations that the state of California was going to fund through a bonded indebtedness that the state had engaged in for development purposes. And then we went to work when people start thinking about other kinds of things like stem cell research. We went to work to make sure that that would be located in California, and the politics produced all that. So a combination of the politics, the combination of the states participating through the University of California, the Board of Regents, the private sector seeing the golden opportunity to, in fact, produce for whomever their investors happen to be, including multiple pension funds. That reality set in, and hence we have Mission Bay. And it's far beyond anything I had initially envisioned, or I knew that we could do something there and we could do something really wonderful, but I never knew it would be the standard for Boston and all of the other places, North Carolina, wherever you go. That's the standard by which you know that urban development opportunities are there. And believe me, when Jerry and Nancy and crowd dumped redevelopment, they did not ever focus on us at all. They allowed us the privilege of continuing the process, calling it something else. And we're still doing it that way.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Innovation.
Just a couple of things. First and foremost, I'm sure that as you drive through Mission Bay these days, you will have a totally different perspective on that particular facility. And as somebody who used to work for Mayor Brown, I now have to revise some of the things I would say about you in terms of innovation, et cetera, et cetera. I see serendipity is probably much more your forte in these things. But as it turned out, it worked out great. So, Kim Majerus is the Vice President of Cisco Technologies. And thank you for flying in from Chicago. And Kim is in charge of sort of the growth of much of the product and service revenues. And I will say I had a brief occasion to visit with Cisco. As we were planning the Hunters Point Candlestick development, following some of the work that Bruce was doing in other parts of the city, of the country, we realized that there was a keen opportunity to integrate technology in ways that, frankly, at that time, as just a real estate developer, as a home builder, we hadn't really thought about. So we were introduced to Cisco, and we went down to their headquarters, and I got to see the future of technology through Cisco's eyes. Cisco, that was the first place I'd heard of the Internet of Things, and then this catchphrase of smart and connected communities. And I know that Cisco has actually had great success dealing with those smart connected communities and the Internet of Things in places like Songdo in Korea and certainly in Bangalore in India. And I am curious, how is that going, and how did Cisco even get into this particular sort of niche?
Well, I got the lead over to say, boy, I'm glad you're next after that. You're a tough act to follow, so I'm going to do my best and try to keep it entertaining. So thank you very much for the opportunity. And listening to the speakers earlier, it just reinforced everything that makes me proud to be a part of an organization like Cisco, but most importantly, supporting the public sector space. So my responsibility is state, local, and education, anything from K through 12 to great partnerships with university systems across the US. So I want to put it a little bit in context. So today, less than 1% of things are connected, less than 1%. By 2020, 212 billion things will be connected. And then when you think about 2017, and it just feels like it was so far away, but it just reminds me I'm getting older and older, the amount of people that will be connected would be 3.5 billion. Now, why is that important? How is that important? When you speak about the infrastructure to which the state offers, the city offers, and what you did in Mission Bay, those are physical things. Those are things that offer community and connectivity to people physically. And when you think about the Internet of Things or the connectivity expectations, I was speaking earlier to someone else about how the millennials or the next generation workforce actually comes to work every day. Well, unfortunately, they don't physically come to work every day. They want to live in Mission Bay. They want to live in all these great, wonderful city urban places. But work is where they live. Work is where they choose. It's at the Starbucks. It's at the, taking a call as they're walking through the Gap, or just sitting on a park bench at the Embarcadero, right? So when you think about how the evolution of expectation of what infrastructure truly is, it's not just physical, but it's the absolute connectivity. I reference those points because it's going to drive something that, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, I would even offer maybe even 5 years ago, people didn't understand the importance of analytics that you could capture out of connectivity. So I'm going to reference something that came out of San Francisco, and if I didn't have connectivity, I wouldn't have been able to look up some of the statistics as I was hearing some of the others speak. So there's an assumption, and these are rough numbers that were pulled out. In San Francisco, the assumption from the police department that at least 80% of the time when someone hears a gunshot, that they would actually report it to the police department. 80% would be good. When they actually looked at the analytics and the data of the information that they have been able to collect, in San Francisco alone, it's about 10%. So when someone hears a gunshot, only 10% of the time that's reported. In the Oakland area, oddly enough, it was around 22%. But again, this goes back to what is connectivity giving us? It's giving us automated connections, whereas manually, if a street light went out and you had to change it to a street sign to say stop, or when there was a major accident, or if there was an issue with traffic, you physically had to pick somebody up, send them to that location to modify or change the traffic flow. Connectivity offers an automation that is not seen in times past. And when you look at traffic flow and the importance of it, as you look at the congestion and the challenges and how to keep the constituents happy, you have to automate things. It allows for faster decision making, whether it's for a medical decision, whether it's for investment. You have the ability to collect data instantaneously because you're now collecting it and holding on to it and being able to make smarter decisions. And the interesting part is the Internet of Everything, that connectivity, that ability to capture all that, it's going to uncover information that folks never have seen in the past. Kofi, you mentioned a couple of the cities. I actually did a little bit more. I've got the Korea one's actually pretty interesting, but I actually have numbers on Barcelona. So Barcelona is an amazing city. If you haven't been to Spain, go, it's beautiful. But they actually embarked on something different. They wanted to find a way to re-engage, revitalize an area and actually drive something different. So it's about a creative economy. So just some numbers from them. They created the City Tech and Innovation District. It was estimated that 4,500 new companies moved into that area since 2000. Over a quarter of them were knowledge intensive types of companies. And 3 out of 10 of them created after 2000 were actually known as knowledge and technology intensive organizations. Now, what did that do? Workers' estimated growth was 90,000 net new workers to that community. And when you look at that, and by the way, that does not include freelance, and there's a lot of freelancers out there, so unfortunately we weren't able to collect that data. But interesting enough, that's 62.5% more people into that place. Now, just because the job's there, that's one thing, but the economic regeneration of what it did to that community in embracing big data, connectivity as a standard. It's not an exception. It's not just dedicated to those who have, it's opened up to everyone who can. And I think that's the difference. So when we think about the regeneration of the city, infrastructure is physical, but it's also the ability for everybody to connect. I think about education and what we see at K through 12 in San Francisco, the one-to-one initiatives, giving students the opportunity to not only just connect, to understand and to be able to collect interesting data that allows them to learn and grow as individuals, but it's also the ability to take that knowledge connectivity that they're gaining from the schools, whether you're K through 12 or the higher ed space, and bringing it home. Because that education has to continue, and that is going to create the knowledge workforce that wants to stay. I did a stint, I was general manager in Ireland for 3 years, and the biggest challenge that the country had was they were putting out amazing talent. But that amazing talent, after they finished their career, that amazing talent left. So when they left their home, they left their family. Now, as they continue to look at regenerating their own country, similar to what we're talking about here, is how do you get them to stay? How do you get them to continue to invest in the community? So from a company perspective, it's exciting because I get to partake and listen and hopefully allow for different ways of thinking how technology actually empowers the community.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, one of the things we are working on is you've heard it here, the Hunters Point Shipyard, San Francisco Shipyard, and Candlestick. And most people think of it as, 12,000 homes, which is a lot of much needed homes in this town. But it also is about 3.2 million square feet of office and R&D. And as part of that office in R&D, we are working with a number of different, frankly, companies right now, because we're committed to try to bring about 800,000 square feet of that office R&D into the marketplace within the next 4.5 years. And as part of that process and thinking through the work that's going on with the Brookings and the innovation districts, it's critical to have a key educational component, because not only is clearly the commercial real estate prices in downtown San Francisco are certainly pushing people to look elsewhere, but also we have a significant area that's entitled in the shipyard area that we think we can capture some of that innovation, some of that growth. But this time, to be really purposeful about it and put it and connect it with the kinds of technology that perhaps Cisco and others have. But a key component of these innovation districts is education. And certainly, Dr. Les Wong is the president of San Francisco State, and certainly he's a representative of the California State University system, which is a key partner to many of the major anchor institutions around the state as they provide the jobs. A couple of times today, different speakers have talked about Enrico Moretti's statement about, one tech job, 5 other jobs. I would surmise, Les, that many of those 5 other jobs actually come from folks who have worked or been educated and trained by an institution such as yours. Could you talk to us a little bit more about your work?
Thank you, Kofi. I really am also honored to be on the stage with really some good partners and folks like Cisco that we've been having a long conversation with, and the Lennar group, and many of you that are in the audience. And I want to thank Bruce and John for providing me a real nice, easy, mid-speed fastball over the plate that I can hit with their discussion about the important ingredient of higher education and education facilities within these innovation districts. We've been having a very quiet but intense discussion at San Francisco State about our future and how we want to take what we do out into the community, because we've always done that. It's part of our DNA to be part of San Francisco and the Bay Area. And we have an illustrious alum to my left here as well. I was going to ask how many people in the audience are alums, but I'll save that for later on in the week when we unleash our new mascot. But I'm really honored, because I do want to take this moment to share with you all something that I think needs to be public now. And having spent a lot of my career in the Midwest, they always talk about fish or cut bait. And this is the moment for San Francisco State to step forward, because in our discussions on campus, with Lennar, with many of our corporate partners that we've been having a great discussion with, we plan on being the anchor institution in the Hunters Point area. I wasn't expecting that. That's very nice of you.
I had everybody primed for that.
We're looking to identify a number of our award-winning programs that have technical components to them. We've talked about digital arts, we've talked about IT things, but as my colleagues are saying, we're even talking about hospitality management and other programs that are part of that innovation idea that makes that community prosperous, robust. And as Kim was saying, it holds on to young people and keeps them in the city. We would not be in this if we were even coming close to either bringing in talent from outside or displacing the talent that is in San Francisco. It is in our genes that we develop the talent in San Francisco so that young people can stay and be productive in San Francisco. And so we're very excited about shaking hands with Lennar, with Cisco, with many of you. We're looking at shaking hands with City College, who sends us our brightest transfer students. The San Francisco Unified Schools, which is producing incredibly talented young people. many of whom want to go to school, they want to go to college, they want to get their college degree at an affordable, accessible place in San Francisco, and that is San Francisco State. We're hoping that there's somewhere near 60,000 square feet or more for us to locate programs, faculty. As many of you know, if you've not been in our campus, like many of the examples that Bruce raised, we're landlocked, we're as vertical as we can get. We're becoming a residential campus. This past year, we had over 52,000 applications for 3,000 spots. And so it's not a matter of shifting students over to the Hunters Point area, but it really is accommodating the demand to be at San Francisco State and to be part of the tremendous faculty and staff and student body that are present. I would close by offering an idea that makes San Francisco State just simply perfect for this. We do a tremendous amount of research that probably many of you don't know about, and we're going to do a much better job of identifying that. We're known for having great teachers and great instruction, and you know about that as well. But what distinguishes us really is that the heart of our science and our teaching is that it comes alive in the community. We expect our students to make a difference in our communities. We're actually adopting the phrase, it's really kind of interesting, we're talking about excellence applied. We want every student, English major, computer science major, physics major, biology major, to make sure, and their faculty, that the work that they do contributes to the well-being of the city, the region, and this whole area. And I think that's been the history of San Francisco State's excellence, and I think our presence in the Hunters Point area simply continues that tradition at a much different and more intense level. And I have to tell you, when you look at the effect of University of California, San Francisco anchoring that whole Mission Bay piece, I think we can do similarly and shake hands with them as well and really open up that innovation zone, district, whatever neighborhood that we'll call Hunters Point for now, and proudly fly the San Francisco State flag.
That's wonderful.
At that site.
Wonderful. If I may impose on you a little bit, because some of the conversations we've had, Laz, have also dealt with how high schools may participate in some fashion, which is of extraordinary importance, as you know, to the adjacent community. And we've had some preliminary conversations with the San Francisco Unified School District, and they're certainly open to the notion of working with institutions such as yours. So perhaps you can describe the concept very briefly.
Yeah, we have a really fascinating concept and discussion with our partners, and that is to examine how we might fuse the senior year of high school with the freshman year of college. And in more than just a dual enrollment piece, but for example, I mean, I don't want to put Kim on the spot. You know, suppose Cisco says, you know, we need 30 people in this mid-level IT critical point in our business. We can't find people that can do that work. We can't find particularly opening up opportunities for underrepresented students, et cetera. It might very well be that as a partner, San Francisco Unified Schools, the senior year, we can begin preparing those students for that economy, for those jobs. They can continue their college education at San Francisco State and literally make a seamless step from their high school senior year into college. We think it'll be cost effective. We think it'll attract a lot of talent, and we think it'll provide enough motivation for students to see the importance of their education. So hand in hand with our private sector partners and San Francisco Unified Schools and State, and even some of the other CSU schools, we think this notion of perhaps fusing the high school senior year with the freshman year of college is a very, very attractive idea that we'll explore.
Wonderful, wonderful. So clearly is creating and promoting talent, certainly pursuing technology, the collaborative leadership and setting a vision, and therefore providing enhanced access to capital. Those are the 5 keys, and I think thank you all so much for providing that, your specific perspectives on these issues. We have about 5 minutes, and I have 4 questions, if I may pose them. Nancy, the first is to you. How can California lead in economic growth and technology when the tax structure is so challenging? And the example, of course, is our newly departed Tesla Gigafactory. So perhaps you have a few things to say about that.
Well, a couple things. One, the truth is that the tax structure has been what the tax structure has been for a very long time. And California is, as John indicated, and as you look at all kinds of things, including this state attracts more venture capital than most other states combined. We are not hobbled by our tax structure. Could it be better? Could it be less volatile? Yes, but this state still is a center of innovation for the country. Our education system is an anchor for our creativity and innovation. And we've got great companies and great innovation, large and small, like Cisco and all kinds of things in California. So I think that the root of the question is, yes, we still have challenges and there are still big things to do in the state, but the notion that we can't be a leader is belied by the fact that we are a leader. And I thought there was a second part of that question. It was the tax structure. Oh, Tesla. Look, there is got to be something to the constant competition between states by just putting money in front of them to ask them to stay. And that's really what the Tesla thing came down to. Tesla is still headquartered here. We have an amazing advanced manufacturing plant, Tesla cars in Fremont. We're not concerned about losing one factory to our neighbors in Nevada. And in fact, we think that that will have multiplier effects for California, and we will see them. So we're not troubled by it. We fought to get them here, but at some point you just can't keep putting cash on the table to keep a company in the state.
Thank you. So Les, a couple for you. Is it, I'll paraphrase a little bit, but is it possible for your role or SU's role in the Innovation District to include other campuses in the region?
It would, and in fact, I was talking to a colleague from San Jose State. They're more than welcome. I mean, that's the power of the CSU. 23 campuses serving nearly 400,000 students. We are the talent bank for the state of California in many respects. So that is something we're more than welcome to talk with them about. Absolutely. Can I add something? Kim raised an interesting point about IT not just simply being those hardcore IT businesses. We do a little unofficial poll of freshmen. One of the questions we ask them is, how many web-enabled devices do you use on a regular basis? And I'm going to tell you the answer because no audience has come close. But the freshmen were telling us somewhere between 7 and 9 web-enabled devices regularly used. I couldn't name 5. And they started talking about televisions and game players. And so it gives you an idea that the whole IT sector isn't this way as much as it's going to be this way. And I think that's what Kim's point was really important.
While it was Les's question, I will certainly say I would welcome to talking to anybody from any other education institution if they wish to talk to us about a potential location on the shipyard.
Just as long as they like purple and gold.
So, Kim, the question is, how can big tech play a role in the concept of innovation districts? relative to being part of educating the workforce. In other words, Cisco's work, I know, and certainly your work, dealing with technology and education. Could you elaborate perhaps on that?
Absolutely, and I'll play off of some of the things that you've talked about. We're starting to see a huge connection between the K through 12, the junior, senior year of high school, and how they're partnering with the local community colleges and obviously four-year universities. Sustainability of an educational cost, what's the return on the investment, as we heard earlier? It's becoming increasingly difficult to afford university studies. But what they're doing that's creative is using collaborative tools to allow a student who is sitting in a high school to be able to connect into a university level class and be able to start to gain university credits before they've even left high school. We've got a huge amount of talented kids that don't have access, it's pure access, to AP level teachers, instructors, to allow them not to take the senior year off, but really to continue to challenge them and allow them to grow. That's one piece. So that partnership, Long Beach has, it's called Long Beach Promise. It's a great example of how they're working those partnerships from community college, K through 12, and including the CSU Long Beach. Now, second to that is there's an evolution of how people are working in, let's call it communications, because that's what it was 20 years ago, and it's kind of evolving to a different world. We have to retrain people. Folks that used to maintain a certain type of technology or be in a certain type of industry that have either left the US because of the cost effectiveness, or more importantly, is no longer relevant. There's a huge community of people that should not give up on the workforce, but should have an opportunity to come back into the workforce retrained and reskilled. And that shouldn't take another 4-year university diploma, no offense. But it should, the community can offer an opportunity to be retrained using the basic skill sets that they have in leadership and management to understand what a net new technology or a net new field is adjacent to what they grew in. So from a company, and it's not just Cisco, there's many companies that play in this role, but it's important for us to think about how do we offer that access of education, and you have to do it differently. People should not have to physically get up and move like a student from high school to community college or higher ed, but they should be able to have access via collaborative tools, video, web conferencing. It's a different world, and that different world looks different. It's not just physical. I grew up in an environment where the nuns made me kneel on the pencils on the floor if I wasn't paying attention. That's how we learn, by discipline, by you must. That is not how the generation of tomorrow and the millennials are looking. They want to learn on their time. They want to understand in their way and the flexibility of learning. So that's how Cisco wants to play a part of it. There are, it's the art of what's possible. When we talk to our partners in higher ed, it's just like, give us a moment, and that moment is to come in and show you what is possible. It's not a physical campus. It's about what is possible. So that's really where we play.
Great, thank you. Well, please join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you.
You got
all
off
very
scot-free.
much.
No questions for the mayor.
It wasn't there.
Yeah, I know.
Bob, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you, Kofi.
Thank you.
And thank you to the panelists. We want to prove to our panelists that we still make things here in San Francisco. So we have a little small gift of chocolate for you. Ghirardelli is a significant San Francisco presence, and we want to thank them once again. So let me just take a few minutes to say what's next. Obviously, all of you, when we talk about 9/11, remember what happened at 9/11. Well, today is 9/10, and today is a beginning, not a conclusion. What we heard today is a start, and it's a start of what's possible, and it's a start for engagement of you in the involvement in a discussion about what we can do to make San Francisco better and respond to the changing marketplace. I think that what's unique about today is that we were able to bring people together to begin a conversation. We were also able to invite our regional partners. So we will begin a conversation with Brookings' help to talk to our region that includes Fremont and Vallejo and Concord and Oakland and Alameda, on a meaningful discussion on the regional assets that Bruce talked about in his conversation. I think that we're proud as the San Francisco Chamber to play a role in this. Our division and partner, San Francisco Center for Economic Development, is indeed a player in the global space, as well as the marketing and attraction of companies to San Francisco, because that too raises the tide that we've talked about many before. So these are tough questions, and they require reasonable people coming together to work on solutions. I want to thank particularly Wells Fargo, Peter Grebley, and your colleagues for the support today. We could not have done this without you. The other sponsors as well that we mentioned before, including Lennar and Kaiser and Dignity Health and Pacific Gas and Electric Company and Hathaway Dinwiddie, as well as our folks, friends at Webcor. All have assisted us in making this possible. Let me conclude by mentioning a couple of things about some events coming up. One event I want to mention that hasn't been publicized yet because we just reached an agreement with our friends at the Mountain View Chamber and the San Jose Silicon Valley Chamber, and it has to do with Rio. We talked about learning about what's going on in Rio. Well, we have the opportunity to travel, and actually we did this as part of our SF Up program. That's our up-and-comers, the millennials. That's our millennial program that's here at the Chamber. Well, these three chambers have decided in April of next year that we would create a synergy between chambers and do a trip. And the Chamber here has done many trips before, China and otherwise. Well, Rio's been selected. So you'll be hearing about promotion. United Airlines is helping with the promotion of that event. They do fly there, and so we are going to be part of that. But on October 1st, our Excellence in Business Awards, the EBBIES, is being held. A lot of great companies, and many of you have never heard of before, will be represented and honored that evening. And then a very special event, our second annual Golden State Warriors tip-off event. It's a great entertainment value for your customers and your colleagues and even your family. The entire staff, the players, the ownership group all play a role in that, and that will be held on October 22nd at Hyatt Regency along the Embarcadero. I want to thank Mary Boyle and Talisa Lavery for leading the staff on this. Many other staff members you saw around the room, thank you for your support and help. Many of you asked about the Metropolitan Revolution book that Bruce has written. Thanks to Michael Tucker and Books, Inc. for providing some copies here suitable for signature. And we are adjourned, but with one note. When you leave today, think about what role you could potentially play in a conversation about creating a meaningful innovation district here in San Francisco, one community that has three unique innovation districts. So thank you for your attendance.